All right, good evening, y'all, and welcome to tonight's Imagine Austin speaker series. This speaker series is at its core an opportunity to grow the implementation of the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan through shared dialogue and mutual learning. So thanks everyone for coming out and joining us tonight for this important discussion about a tremendously important and urgent topic affecting our city and our community today around homelessness. The format of tonight's discussion will be first hearing from our terrific presenters about their work, and then we'll open up the conversation to you all for questions. We're requesting that you put your questions on the index cards that were provided out front. We can make sure that everybody gets some of those also if you don't have one now. And then we'll collect them and read them out because we have our ATXN network recording tonight's presentation for all the folks who couldn't come, and so we're going to read out the questions on the mic. Also, please be sure to pick up a survey and leave one filled out before you leave tonight. Our discussion this evening will focus on real solutions to ending homelessness that have been implemented in Austin and in Houston. We will hear from several experts in the field, including, coming all the way from Houston, Texas, we have Eva Thibodeau, Chief Program Officer with the Houston Coalition for the Homeless. Local Austinite, Alan Graham, the CEO and founder of Mobile Loaves and Fishes, as well as the Community First Village, located in Travis County, and Carrie O'Connor, Director of the Office of Innovation with the City of Austin. So please join me in welcoming them now.
Well, thank you so much for battling traffic and whatever you had to do, or scootering over, or whatever it took you to get here. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. I've been working in trying to prevent and end homelessness for over 20 years. I'd like to talk a little bit today about what we have done in Houston. Not everything is transferable, so I'm saying that on behalf of your Austin folks when you come beating down their doors to say, why don't you just do it like that? Everywhere is different. Politics are different. Funding streams are different. Major players in a community are different. There are some commonalities, which I hope that I'll be hitting on today. I think the biggest thing to take away, though, is that homelessness is very complex. It is a huge social problem that is the symptom of the failure of many, many other systems. And we can end homelessness and we can solve the problem of homelessness when we come together and leverage all the resources that we have. So yes, it is a problem, and yes, there is hope and there are solutions, and that's what we're focusing on today. So again, I'm from the Coalition for the Homeless, and we serve as the lead agency within our community, meaning that we serve those who serve. We do not provide direct services. And when we talk about the collaborative work that we do in our community to prevent and end homelessness, we found we had to come up with new language. We couldn't say, my agency did this, and my agency did this and did this. We realized that we were working so collaboratively and integrated together that we had to come up with some way to talk about the work that we were doing. And so we named ourselves as a collective, The Way Home. So back in 2012, we really radically changed the way that we were doing business. Prior to 2012, we had been doing work agency by agency, program by program. Oftentimes within a single agency, programs weren't even aligned. Different requirements for getting services. You had to redo paperwork and resubmit ID and all sorts of things for every single program that you went into. And the end result was that it was very, very complex and confusing for a person experiencing the crisis of homelessness and the trauma of homelessness to access services. So we decided that we were going to take a step back as a community, look across the table from each other while we were still doing the tough work, and examine our practices and how a person moved through our system. And so we changed from the person experiencing the crisis having to figure out our system to trying to create a system that made sense and easily pushed and flowed someone through to a permanent housing and end of homelessness outcome. We also went from managing homelessness to trying to end homelessness. So all of our solutions, all of our funding, all the work that we do now is about ending homelessness. It's about solving that crisis for someone. It's no longer about managing the condition of homelessness, because particularly in an area as resourced as we are, we decided that was not acceptable. So the answer in the services used to be, and the funding used to go to, what helps me get through the day? Where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to eat? My shoes are worn out. I need a jacket. I need some hygiene stuff. I need laundry done. I don't feel well. I'm going to check in at a clinic. And we really shifted everything and answered every question of, how does this end someone's homelessness? So if you are going to eat somewhere, what else is attached to that to help you exit homelessness? So we adopted a practice called Housing First. I'm going to talk a little bit about it because your city person here is going to talk very eloquently about a lot of other things besides Housing First. So it used to be that we would say to someone who is experiencing unsheltered homelessness and deep crisis, when you look ready and presentable enough for housing, and you can show me that you've been sober and you're taking your medications, and your hypertension is in order, and you've also accepted the faith that I believe in, then you can get housing. We realize that when people are in deep crisis, they're not worried about self-actualizing. What they're worried about is getting off of the streets and out from under a bridge. And so we started going directly to the people who are living on the streets and simply saying, are you interested in permanent housing? Here's a navigator. Here's the way that can happen. And of course, there was a lot of distrust. There was like, yeah, what are you going to make me do? Well, what programs do I have to go to? What meetings do I have to do? We're like, no, you just have to, be a good tenant. And we have a bunch of services that if you're interested, we want to help you do what you want to do. And so that's called Housing First. So we house people who aren't sober. We house people who are active in their substance use. We house people who are mentally ill. We house people who hate their case managers and think that we're all wretched, awful people who are taking advantage of them. And guess what? 93% plus of them are remaining housed 2 years and more later. So that's Housing First. We also really beefed up our ongoing supportive services because housing is the first intervention to end homelessness, but it doesn't keep people housed. You need to wrap services around them. And that's everything from walking with you to the store to helping you open a bank account or get direct deposit of your Social Security benefits, to just being there to listen and sit with you as you make a phone call and connect with a family member that maybe you haven't talked to in 20 or 30 years. And then the other piece is that for most people, there is not going to be a rental assistance subsidy to help them end their homelessness. Their homelessness is only going to be ended with mainstream competitive employment income. So we worked with our Workforce Solutions, our Workforce Development Board, and they embedded an office in every single emergency shelter where people first come into contact with the homeless system. We're saying, okay, what's your income path out? So when we looked in 2012 and before on how people maybe can resolve homelessness, we came up with what we called the pickup sticks slide, which is that basically good luck getting help anywhere. It was an incredibly program-centered approach. If you happen to stumble in a door that maybe had something available that day, you might get something, but you might end up getting soup when what you really need is healthcare. And so we switched to something called coordinated entry, which your community does have. And what it does is it asks the same assessment questions of every person experiencing a crisis of homelessness and says, this is your housing way out or this is your income way out. And so whether you go to a drop-in shelter, if you're or a day shelter, if you're an emergency shelter, we have call-in for our domestic violence and anti-human trafficking partners and our schools. All of our street outreach folks do these housing assessments and income assessments while they're on the street talking to people. And then you get triaged within that. And so again, the old way of doing it is that if you could get to my front door first and I had something available for housing, then you got that. But guess who never got to the front door? The most vulnerable, long-term, seriously disabled folks. They were the folks who were staying on the streets. And in 2011 in Houston, we had far more people unsheltered during our point in time annual snapshot looks at who's experiencing homelessness. We had more people on the streets than we had in shelter. And they were extremely medically and behaviorally vulnerable. So the way that we do coordinated entry is that it's a dynamic prioritization process. So if you come to me today and I've never seen you before, or you've never communicated with me before, and I've seen you in the same place, day after day after day, and you have the highest score, meaning you're the most vulnerable person right now in our community, then you get the available housing slot because you go to the top of the list. So it's not about who gets there first and who can get things done the quickest. So using these approaches, since 2011, we have seen over 50% decline in overall homelessness. Let me put that in a little bit of context because there are a lot of numbers, and as my colleague points out, we all look at data very differently. So this is a point-in-time snapshot using common methodology over long periods of time to look at trends about is homelessness increasing or decreasing. And so you'll see in 2013 is when we really had that critical, we had more people sheltered finally than we had unsheltered, which meant that those about 2 years of doing really hard work of moving people off of the streets and directly into housing. You don't have to go to shelter first. We can get you right into housing. It was working, and we were getting our most vulnerable people and those who had been unsheltered for so long into housing and off of the streets. And so we've reduced it by about half in this metric, but we know that the systems that are feeding into homelessness are not slowing down. Our criminal justice, our child welfare, foster care, juvenile justice, release from psychiatric and hospital settings, and county jails. Those feeders remain wide open. And the work that we're doing is important and it's good, but we have to keep running really, really, really fast to keep pace with this. So we have at this point in Houston kind of reached a plateau around that 4,000 point in time number that we know we're going to have to come up with a ton more resources to get over that hurdle. We've done it before and we'll do it again. But again, this is tough work and it's relentless. However, since January 2012, over 17,000 individuals have been housed in permanent housing. So this does not include all of the folks who found their way back into housing through income. This is those who we know what their address is. We watched them sign a lease, and they are in permanent housing. Over 17,000 and counting, because people got housed today in Houston while I was here. One of our big housing partners is a group called New Hope Housing. And they build multifamily housing. You're going to hear a bit about Community First here further on in the presentations. Our model in Houston, because we do have very abundant land and it's still affordable, it is more economically feasible for us to do multifamily housing and multiple stories than not to. And so if you ever come to Houston, come visit a New Hope property. They are dignified. They are beautiful. My retirement dream is to go live in one of their properties. They're incredible places. And they are developing new units or new buildings pretty much every single year. And they have a 10, 15-year plan. And we get about 150 of those units dedicated to serving and housing formerly homeless folks with every one that they open up. So what does it take? Really takes partnerships, and it takes deep partnerships. We had our city and county officials, we had our private funders, all of our public government funders come together, and we looked and projected at how many new permanent supportive housing units did we need. We came up with the number of 2,500. And we started this in 2013, and we just got to the 2,500 number. The last ones are in development now. We also realized that we could really save dollars and put more money toward the supportive services if we had the partnership of a public housing authority. And so our public housing authorities did something called a homeless preference, which means that people who come through coordinated entry can jump the wait list and can get into units immediately. So our area community, they have a homeless preference for 250 of their vouchers every year that we and the homeless response system can use to resolve people's homelessness. And they also have committed over 1,000 project-based vouchers, which are going into all of those new Hope housing units that I showed you to be the rental subsidy for people who are exiting homelessness. Again, we brought our public and our private funders together. They had never sat at tables together. Once they started talking, they realized, wow, we're all really funding a lot of the same things, but we're going to have a real system capacity problem here because we're not lifting anyone else up or building their capacity to serve, and we're going to wear these folks out. And so they started to make joint funding decisions. They did aligned applications so that when a provider was asking for money, they didn't have to fill out like 6 different applications because they were in all these different jurisdictions. And they meet regularly, and they're looking at the same common outcomes and the same goals. And they're asking us, how can we hold people accountable for getting outcomes? And then we also had our workforce development board step up. And so we were able to shift money that we used to take out of homeless response and put into employment, trying to get people mainstream employment, competitive employment jobs. Well, guess what? Texas Workforce Commission and the Department of Labor, they put tons and tons of money into our workforce development boards, and that's their job. And so they stepped up to the table and have been a real player at the within this work. And so I talked a little bit or referenced, that means you have to shift resources. We didn't have a big initiative where all the people of the greater Houston area came together and said, tax me more. I really, really want to give more money because I care. That didn't happen, okay? And it has not happened yet. We needed to look at how we were spending dollars and where we were putting them and figure out what we needed to reallocate. So things that were not getting results, or things that maybe were getting results but cost a heck of a lot of money, we shifted those dollars into lower cost, more effective strategies. Some of our organizations, they started co-locating. If you were only a breakfast feeding and people had to walk 3 miles to go get breakfast and then spend the rest of the morning walking back to get lunch, the other 3 miles, and then spend the afternoon getting back to their shelter, we were just putting an unnecessary burden on the people in crisis. And so we had folks start co-locating to reduce the footprint that people experiencing homelessness had to go in order to get their needs met. And it was a place where they could get connected with things that actually got them out of homelessness. And then we also stopped duplicating services. So people really sat down and accepted that I don't have to be everything to everyone. We are now in this as partners and as a system, so I can focus on what I'm really good at and what my staff is fantastic at, and I have this partner to do this. So our goal is that by 2020, no one has to be without permanent housing for longer than 30 days. Very, very aspirational. There are many challenges that still remain. We need sustainable local resources. We have gotten about as efficient as we possibly can with what we have. And so we have a big call out right now to our partners saying, if we want to keep, this PSH pipeline, and if we want to keep having services and moving people out of homelessness, then we have got to fund the services. We also need new levels of care. People are aging in the housing that they're in, and there aren't places for them to go. There are folks who are on the streets right now who need a higher level of care, like assisted living or a personal care home type thing, where they also understand behavioral health issues, so substance use disorders and serious mental illness. We do not have low barrier shelter within our community. It is all privately run and faith-based, and so we have a lot of people who will not seek shelter. Affordable housing, enough said. And we need to really continue the collaboration. Collaboration and working together to maximize our resources is what has gotten us this far, but it takes a lot of energy. It's a lot of work to keep collaborating. And so it's keeping that energy level up, keeping that intensity on, and hopefully it will continue to keep Houston on the track that we've been, which is reducing the number of people experiencing the crisis of homelessness. Thank you.
Good evening, y'all. Thanks for coming out and listening to us this evening. My name is Carrie O'Connor, and I'm the City of Austin's Chief Innovation Officer. The presentation that I'm about to give to you is from a different lens. Because I'm the city's innovation officer, my job is to look at what else, what's missing, what else, what new technologies, what new approaches, what new ways of teaming do we have. And I'm going to speak less about housing because you've heard sort of Housing First and how that works. We have a similar organization here in Austin called the Ending Community Homelessness Coalition, which serves a similar purpose of coordinating our Housing First resources. I'm going to speak to you from the viewpoint of the City of Austin and kind of what I've seen us do in the past couple of years. So just to give you a sense of how the Innovation Office has been involved over the years, in about 2015, I was asked by one of our assistant city managers to take a look at what's going on around the Arch, the Austin Resource Center for the Homeless. And it was quickly apparent to me that that was something that was a much bigger and deeper problem, and there wasn't going to be a quick fix. So we started looking at more holistic ways of doing change, of using design thinking, testing and prototyping, service design. We took a group of people up from Austin, from the police department, Austin Public Health, Ending Community Homelessness Coalition, the Downtown Austin Alliance, and we went to a social innovation lab in Toronto, where they were doing service design in a homeless drop-in shelter there. While the team was there, and it also included Austin Police Department, everybody was thinking about things that they could do back home, and they decided to do a homelessness outreach street team. So we helped support that team while they were getting started and build evidence of what they were doing and how it was working. That street team is made up of 2 medics, police officers, mental behavioral health counselors from Integral Care, and a case manager from the Downtown Austin Community Court. The court is a city entity, the downtown court, that focuses on quality of life crimes, so maybe public drunkenness, the kinds of things that if we put you in jail, it would probably just make your situation worse, and they try to make your situation better by getting you a case manager and getting you access to services. After that, we received a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies to put together an innovation team, where that team conducted 120 interviews of people living the experience of homelessness in order to get from their point of view how the system works. And then we came up with a number of insights. We tested and prototyped various things, and we worked in collaboration with a lot of city departments. And so what I'm going to tell you about now is sort of where I see we are, in fact, building ways of making change happen to maybe get off of some plateaus and think about ways that we can accelerate change. Just a quick baseline about homelessness in Austin. It's important to know that our data is based on how we define it. So if you're working with HUD, the Housing and Urban Development federal agency's definition of homelessness, you're going to have a certain, in all of your data systems are oriented towards that definition. You're going to have a different number than, let's say, if you're the Austin Police Department and you don't have to use that definition of homelessness, or you're Central Health and you don't have to use that definition of homelessness, you're going to see higher numbers. And for me, as somebody who's looking at the city as a system, those higher numbers are really interesting because these may be people who are couch surfing, maybe they're living out of their car, they're not chronically homeless, but they're kind of that feeder system that Ava was talking about, and so we want to pay attention to them as well. So when we talk about human-centered design, which is an innovation method, we talk about how do we make decisions from business or social needs, from social and political landscapes, from the capacity of our stakeholders and our staff, as well as the user needs, the human needs. And ideally, we're going to try to make decisions about what new things we can do from that center. But first, we want to see what does it look like when we learn from the people themselves, those who are living the experience of homelessness. And so I'm going to show you a 3-minute video. These are snippets from the interviews that the innovation team did to give you maybe a flavor for some of the things that folks on the street are experiencing.
I mean, I'm thinking of one particular client. She's living with schizophrenia, and it's untreated. So she gets a check from Social Security, and she's drug-free, alcohol-free. She's so sick and so vulnerable. People know where she is, how much money she gets, when the money comes. They get her PIN number. Her $735 will go in less than 24 hours.
Because my medicines that I was on, I was taking it for ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia, and paranoia. And my depression and anxiety. And see, that's a lot. And 1 out of 3 of those pills worked for almost all of that. Yeah, Adderall. And Adderall is just pharmaceutical speed. And which because when I was 18 years old and I didn't have my Medicaid anymore because Medicaid cuts off at age 19, so I had to pretty much be led to street medications, meth.
So after these 3 jobs, me and Anarchy are going to come together and get a 2-bedroom apartment because he has 2 jobs. He also works here sometimes as well. So that's 5 jobs altogether. Yeah. Okay, and that's just amazing. I never thought in my life I would have more than 2 jobs, but look at me. Another roadblock is things don't go as planned. As to where either he loses this job or I lose 1 job, or it's just, shit just goes downhill. And that tends to happen a lot. But if we keep our heads up and everything, it should go as planned.
Have you done like a coordinated assessment?
Yes.
Or?
I have done one. I was going to talk to them about letting Anarchy and I kind of do what we were planning on doing. But if we're probably going to get there before they are ready.
Like the coordinated assessment?
Yeah, before they find me a place to stay. Then we're probably going to get all that done before they even acknowledge my existence.
What makes you say that?
Because I'm on a 2-year waiting list.
Oh, wow.
The first thing you realize when you're homeless is that there's food everywhere in this town. You can get a coat, or some long johns, some socks. You can get that. Those things are wide open for people here. But that won't sustain you. Right. What really sustains you is something that you can do. Big deal. Okay? That even if it's just a grandiose, stratified idea, okay? Like art. Ambiguous as it can be. What's the value in that?
Yeah.
Begin to start to feel like you're somebody.
It makes you feel
With
like you're somebody.
schizophrenia.
You can hit the advanced slide. The videos don't come in and out very easily on these. There we go. So it makes you feel like you're somebody. What else do we need? We need social inclusion. I need to keep taking my medication. I need to get sober. I need to heal. I need access to health care. I need to make ends meet. I need economic stability. I need to not be exploited. I need to not be illegal. I need to avoid being raped, molested, or assaulted. I need safety. I need to use the bathroom. I need a place to store my inhaler. I need a shower and to wash my clothes. I need solitude. I need a good environment and living situation. I need to deal with loneliness. I need to fill a void in my life. I need to get my children back. I need to be the best artist. I need to get my GED. I need a purpose. I need to put something together with my hands. I need education, training, life skills. I need to take care of my aging mother. I need to get a bus pass. I need to get directions. I need to get sneakers. I need to be pushed to do what I need to do. I need mobility. I need to stay optimistic and to stay motivated. All of these things are what folks in the healthcare industry call social determinants, and you need all of them in order not just to be stable, not just to get out of crisis, but also to survive and to thrive. And these needs were all in the words of the people that we interviewed. And so here is another sort of definition of the homelessness system. This was when we interviewed the case managers, the medics, the mental behavioral health counselors. We asked everybody what happens around the person experiencing homelessness, and this is what they defined for us, which is another pickup sticks. I think everybody's got one of these types of maps and diagrams. And what we found from the voices of those living the experience of homelessness is that there tends to be three paths for them as they go through this system. There tends to be a deteriorating path where people are waiting to get sicker in order to get help. There's a relapsing path where they may be failing out of housing. Maybe they're rejoining their community on the street. Maybe they're still trying to deal with their loneliness. And then there's a resilient path, like the last gentleman. In spite of everything, it comes together. You have the social network, and you manage to get out. And when we look at peer-reviewed research, I found this map on the NIH website. And the researchers there looked both at peer-reviewed research, and then they looked at the experiences of the professionals on the front lines. And they found that there were things that were great contributors to homelessness, such as criminal justice involvement, incarceration, addiction, family breakdown, and mental illness. And there were things that tended to alleviate homelessness, such as a social support network, nonprofits, income, education, and government assistance. The other issues, poverty, cost of housing, unemployment, they are issues, but they weren't as strongly correlated to homelessness. So they're not necessarily the biggest risk factor. And I mentioned this because in our society, we don't have a very long-term view. And when we experience a challenge in our society, like what's happening around the Arch, we're like, do something immediately. And then maybe we do something immediately. Maybe we arrest them because they're blocking the public right-of-way. Maybe we create a new ordinance, or we enforce an ordinance that's specifically geared towards cleaning up the streets. But what happens is then those people get incarcerated, and that's not a mental health facility. And incarceration just adds to the risk factors for not getting a house. And when they get out, that's one of the sort of pipeline breaks. People are getting out of jail or getting out of hospitals, and they're not landing where they need to land. So some of the things that we've tried in the past to make ourselves feel better, that we have more control over the situation, are in fact exacerbating a long-term problem, but we don't see it immediately. And so that's why I think it's really important that we talk about these systems dynamics, even though they seem maybe a bit distant or intellectual, or maybe a bit hard to understand. How can we handle all of these things at one time? And so my answer to that is this city has to fire on all cylinders, right? The city itself is a system. And I've had people say to me, Carrie, the answer to homelessness is a house, and we can't solve for poverty. So we have to define the problem and bound the problem so that we can measure our ability to solve the problem. But I would also suggest that a city, with all of its resources, can solve for poverty. And so that's why we need to be looking at the resources that the city has, the resources that the faith-based community has, the resources that a lot of different nonprofits have, that the tech sector has, in order to see what we can do. So we are, and I'm here to say that in 2019, Austin, Texas is firing on all cylinders. This is a diagram that the city auditor put together that demonstrates how many different city departments touch upon homelessness, whether they are a direct service provider, an indirect service provider, or their operations are impacted by homelessness. So if you think of watershed protection, who's looking at our creeks, when they have to go do an encampment cleanup, it's impacting their operations. On the other hand, when you look at the library is a great opportunity to be providing services to people experiencing homelessness. And our library has been inviting case managers and social workers in there to offer services to people. I'm going to show you a little bit of this video. We won't go through the whole thing. But one of the things that after the Homelessness Outreach Street Team had been operating for about a year, they came together and they said, I think that there's something more that we can do. And they created a pop-up resource clinic. And Amber Price, one of our community health paramedics, identified 12 interventions that she could do right here, right now, to improve somebody's quality of life while they're waiting for housing. Years later, the pop-up resource clinic has grown in the number of agencies that are involved and the number of people that it supports.
Hi, I'm Amber Price. I'm a community health paramedic with Austin Travis County EMS, and today we're having a pop-up resource clinic. We designed this service to present resources to those experiencing homelessness in their own community based on the needs. So first you'd come on into the intake table and you'd sit down with one of our community health paramedics who would get your demographics and figure out exactly what resource you needed to be connected to. And then at that point we would partner you up with a navigator. That navigator is going to stay with you the whole way. They're going to help you figure out exactly what you need to do at each table. So over here, one of our first resources is the VA, and we have agents who are from Front Steps as well as Safe Haven today, and they come every single time. They connect you to case management, and they have wraparound services. Then we have Front Step. They print out a service point card right here on site. You'll need that card to get into the arch and to get services throughout the city. So over here we have map services. They would find out if you're eligible and go ahead and do your application today and print you out a card. And then once you have your card, which is typically the first step, then we'll take you over to the AMBUS where we have a full clinic. So in the AMBUS, we have a provider that does assessments, and also they can prescribe your medication or just fix an ailment that's been bothering you. They would do an intake here down at the end. These are the crew that work street med, mobile med, and in the clinic down at the arch. Stop. So Mobile Loaves and Fishes, they're a partner of ours, and they always bring the food truck out. They also have toiletries and some clothes. This way, the people who are working and getting things accomplished at the perk don't have to worry about having to go panhandle or work for the food to eat for lunch. This is a new addition that we have. This is the City of Austin Animal Services. What they do is they do microchip, and they can provide you with supplies such as collars, food, and other things. They're kind of new. They've only been with us a couple of months, but it's worked out really well. In this area, you can address your substance use. You can get counseling. You can do a needle exchange for harm reduction. You can go into treatment, get HIV testing or Hep C testing, and all that's done today on the spot. If you walked in and you had or seeking to get treatment, you can go literally into treatment today. We also have mental health services on site. Over here you can do an intake, you can check in with your case manager, or you can set up an appointment if you've been a recent client. And then we have a special team that we're a part of. It's called the Homeless Outreach Street Team, and it's comprised of Downtown Community Court, Austin EMS, and then we have Integral Care and APD and Court.
We can go ahead and hit
So if you were to partner up.
Sorry if the sound isn't quite where it is. You can imagine that when we do these videos, we're not being followed by a film crew. That would be a little bit intrusive. So that's what we've got. More on healthcare. There's a lot going on in this town with regards to healthcare. The Dell Medical School is working on a mobile clinic. The Sunrise Community Church has a navigation center, and they have a free clinic. There's a lot of continual iterations and adaptations that they're doing to make sure that people get the healthcare that they need. We also have a new program that started last year. The Other Ones Foundation is working with Parks and Recreation to employ people for day labor. They get a living wage, $15 an hour, in order to clean parks. And while they are working with that day labor program, they're also working in the background to make sure that folks get what they need, whether it's to get their documents or to get where they're going. In this Facebook post from April 6th, they said they've paid out $11,000 in salaries to their homeless neighbors, and they've taken out 8 tons of trash from Austin parks. In addition, while they're doing that work, they're breaking down barriers. So they're getting them bank accounts, they're making sure that they're saving money, that they're getting all of their documents together. And then we also had a service design jam last year where we had a bunch of service designers thinking about ways that we could meet needs better. And we noticed people lose their phone quite frequently. So they came up with an idea around Google Voice. So if you lose your phone, you don't lose your contacts and you don't lose your voicemail. And you can go to a public library and pick up phone calls and voice messages from your case manager or your family. We're now trying to test and prototype how this could be rolled out. So we're doing a contract with the Community Technology Network to do digital inclusion training in the libraries and to see if this Google Voice program can make the impact that we think it can. The Homelessness Advisory Committee was something that the I-Team put together in order to test and prototype our own ideas. But ultimately what we realized is that we should not be making public policy about people without them. And people who are experiencing homelessness do not have their own voice in the system. They always have some intermediary voice in the system. And this was a way to bring people in and have them be able to test and prototype and give feedback on the services that are being designed for them and the policies that are being designed for them. This group is now being housed in the Downtown Austin Community Court, where they are advising on services and contracts and any tweaks or additions to how, a new approach might actually impact people living on the street. The paperwork. Ava's already mentioned the paperwork. It's a tremendous amount of work that has to go in collecting their documents. And if you're putting together a disability application, you may have 12 years of medical history. Some of these folks are walking around with boxes and wheeled luggage full of documents. And so what we've done in the Innovation Office is taking our insights from our research that drugs and alcohol are sometimes, mostly, generally, easier to access than social services. What can we do to flip that script? And we are putting together understanding, that there's a lack of trust because the documentation isn't in order. You get mixed messages. It's really kind of a mess and a burden on both sides of the equation. How can we create a platform that will enable people experiencing homelessness to hold on to their key identity documents in order to get better access to services? And we had the Austin technology community come together over a long weekend with social service providers and the Homelessness Advisory Committee. Fingers crossed, y'all, because we're the finalists on a $400,000 grant to continue to work on this platform in concert with a lot of people nationally who are also interested in this very same thing. We've already got cities lining up to want to learn from us and how this kind of a program can work. As I mentioned, a lot of people are working on housing and from a lot of different angles. We also have the strategic housing blueprint, and we have the implementation plan that just came out. So if this is something that you haven't read about, I encourage you to go to austintexas.gov, look up the housing strategic blueprint, look up the implementation plan, and understand how the housing bond that we just passed is going to be implemented, because it will make a big difference in the lives of many people for affordable housing. My last question for you is, what if it's not a hierarchy? What if it's not Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we need to attend to these basics before we get to the other things in life? That's what we heard when we talked to people who were living the experience of homelessness, that they also needed emotional, psychological, mental, and spiritual needs met. They also needed their own sense of self-determination. They needed a sense of competence that they can, in fact, make this journey. They needed a sense of autonomy, that the choices were theirs and that they had agency in the system, and that they needed a sense of connection, not just with their case manager, but with all of you and me, all of us as a community. And there are organizations in our community that are doing that very same thing. If you look at Art from the Streets, that rarefied thing that makes you feel like you're somebody, it's people painting their way into an apartment. If you look at Back on My Feet, the running club for people experiencing homelessness, they do a lot to get people on the pathway to housing with community social support. And LifeWorks, for folks who are coming out of foster care for youth homelessness, they're doing a lot of life skills, all the things that we take for granted that we've been taught about doing taxes and the like. They do a lot of those strengths building workshops. And so the city is a system, and we can come together to engineer, if you will, a sense of vibrancy in our community. And it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be a bunch of small things that come together, that work in concert, that work in collaboration, that are going to move the needle on this very complex issue. Thank you.
Easiest place I've ever been and ever lived. Oh! I love this place. What we're doing here in Austin, Texas has never been done anywhere in the United States of America or the world. Mobile Loaves and Fishes has created a new movement designed to lift the most chronically homeless men and women of our community up off the streets. When I look back on it, it was nothing short of a miracle. The current system for addressing chronic homelessness in the United States of America is absolutely not working. This is a human issue that requires a human response.
Peanut butter and jelly or meat and cheese. You need a blanket, bro? Yeah. Let's grab us some food, man. Yeah.
Mobile Loaves and Fishes was started back in 1998 in order to feed the homeless in Austin, Texas. When the truck goes out, those that are serving and those that are being served are on the same side of the serving counter.
Oreos, cookie, water.
There's no disconnect. And this requires a human-to-human, heart-to-heart relationship.
Yeah, I know what it means. It's the simple thing.
And that singularly was the game changer.
Truly, that food truck ministry is what taught us what we needed to know in order to build Community First Village.
In 2004, I came up with this idea that we could go out and buy a gently used recreational vehicle, lift somebody up off the streets. And I started fantasizing as the serial entrepreneur that I am, why can't we build an RV park?
Community First Village is a 51-acre master-planned community that is designed to lift the chronically homeless up off the streets of Austin. Mobile Loaves and Fishes cares for the people who have experienced long-term homelessness. Many of them 5, 10, 15, even 20 plus years. At that point, they have experienced so much trauma.
We believe that the single greatest cause of homelessness, particularly in our country, is a profound, catastrophic loss of family.
I was married for 8 years. I got a divorce in '92. I lost my house and my world because I lost custody of my son, full custody. It devastated me, so I medicated myself with drugs. To tell you the truth, I really didn't want to live anymore. But coming to Community First, it's been one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Our role is to really bring them into a community where they are loved and cared about and where they have an opportunity to begin the process of healing from all of that trauma.
At Mobile Loaves and Fishes, our only goal is to inspire communities into a lifestyle of service with the homeless. That's it.
The neighbors that live at Community First Village are incredibly gifted human beings. One of the joys of the work that we do is being able to give them the opportunity to put those gifts and talents to work.
We create micro-enterprise opportunities for our neighbors to earn a dignified income doing things that they love to do. We have a car care business, an art house, a pottery operation, a blacksmithing shop, a wood shop, and a full-blown organic farming operation.
Over the last 2 years, we've paid out more than $1 million to our neighbors. That's putting money back into their pockets to help them to be able to earn a living and enjoy life here. All of us desire to have purpose in our life. Community First Village is transforming the lives of everyone who's a part of this community.
This place, it's really empowered me to do great things. I have my own family here, a real family that pulled me up and loved me when I couldn't love myself. This is where I got my life back.
Housing will never solve homelessness, but community will.
This Friday night, Tracy and Charlie in that video will be getting married. They met in the community. They both had traumatic, decades-long experiences on the streets, drug addictions, prostitution, incarceration, all the things that typically go with our friends on the street. It's going to be a beautiful evening. I get to marry them, but I also get to walk her up the aisle and give her away back to me so that I get to marry them. And my wife, Tricia, will be the maid of honor. What I want to lay out for you is our fundamental theory of change, but I want you to understand that the population that we represent at Mobile Loaves and Fishes, laser focused, are the most broken, battered, despised, outcast, lost, and forgotten men and women in our community. The chronically homeless, often homeless for decades. We've done our little calculation on the numbers, and it represents essentially 6/100ths of 1% of the Austin metropolitan area. And that really tracks with the national numbers of 535,000 people that are on the streets on any given night, chronically homeless, is some 1/100ths of 1% of the U.S. population. The reason that I always say this, 6/100ths of 1%, is that this is mitigatable. We can manage this deal if we all come around all the things that are being talked about what we do. So, I want to lay out and just kind of talk about for people to marinate on our fundamental at Mobile Loaves and Fishes theory of change. Number one, these were all mentioned in the video, we believe that the single greatest cost to homelessness is a profound, catastrophic loss of family. And I want to explain that. We believe that the original cell of social society is the family unit. We're not here to define what that is, but we're talking about a nurturing, forming environment for men and women to grow up, boys and girls, men and women. When Ava talked about the foster care system and the criminal justice system, this all leads fundamentally into and flows out of a profound catastrophic loss of family. And unless we begin to go upstream to that area, what's going to be spewing out through those conduits are going to continue to spew out onto the streets. Because fundamentally within each human person are two fundamental human needs. One is to be fully and wholly loved. It's not very complicated. I like to be hugged. I'm a hugger guy and want my hand held, and I want people to tell me that they love me. And secondly, we each desire to be fully and wholly known. We want to be valued for who we are as human beings, and for the things that we do. When you look at that art from the street deal and people are creating that kind of art, and let me tell you, there are some Van Gogh people that are on the streets. It just turns out, and it boggles my mind, how many of our friends that battle profound mental health issues are off the chart on the creative spectrum. But we want them to go to Walmart or McDonald's and get a job. We have to figure out a way to dive in and mine the goodness that's there. When we talk about mining the goodness, I'll tell you that when I moved to Austin, Texas in 1976, there was not one single panhandler on any street corner anywhere in Austin, Texas. And I came from Houston, Texas, and there was none in Houston, Texas. There were men and women selling bottles of water, newspapers, flowers, cow skulls, cow skins, and I'm sure your favorite Velvet Elvis art. And today, through occupational licensing requirements and oftentimes outright outlawing the event, we've only left the remaining bastion of entrepreneurialism for our people that live in extreme poverty to be the First Amendment free speech right to beg. You go to Mexico or any other country in the world and you get off the airplane and you're assaulted by a gauntlet of entrepreneurs. Come to the United States of America and we're assaulted by a gauntlet of beggars, and they do not want to beg. I have personally spent 250 nights living on the streets with my friends, not pretending to be homeless. I am not homeless. I've never been homeless. I wouldn't know what it's like to be homeless, but I have slept with them in every place that they've ever slept. 250 nights. There's 15 of our staff and missionals leaving tomorrow for 24 hours on the street. So we've done the research, man. We've been out there hanging with them. They designed the community. You know what? One of the things that our chronically homeless men and women, schizophrenics, bipolar, depressive, schizoaffective told us, I don't want to share a wall with another human being. So we built a community that doesn't have one single shared wall. Why is that? Because a lot of our friends that battle this issue absolutely know at the core of their being that you and I are putting listening and video devices through the wall in order to spy on them. And so we try to create the spatial environment for them in order to heal from the ravages of living on the streets, to be able to rediscover their purpose in life. Theory one, profound, catastrophic loss of family. People want to be in community, and they want to be valued, and it's critical. It's Maslow's hierarchy. Number two, our philosophy that housing will never solve homelessness, but community will. Please don't misunderstand that we don't believe in housing. We love housing. People need to be in that deal. But you can't take a chronically homeless, 10-year, crack addict, schizophrenic, and stick them in some apartment complex in North Austin where nobody on the planet understands who that person is. Because if they come out tonight with their pants down and grunting like an elephant, 911's going to get called. The police are going to show up. They're going to be arrested. They're going to be incarcerated. And they're going to go to the largest mental health institution in Travis County, which is Del Valley. They end up in jail getting their mental health care from there, and then they're going to get released with really no care whatsoever. In the village, when that happens, and those kinds of things happen, we go and surround them with love and bring the resources that they need to the table to be able to mitigate the particular crisis that they might be in at that particular moment. Housing will never solve homeless, but community will, because people want to live in community. But let me tell you, man, when you move up off the streets of Austin, Texas, or Houston, Texas, or anywhere USA, it is a challenge. And that transitional period of time it takes an awful long time. In fact, we have a theory, just a theory, it's anecdotal. It applies to all of us that have had radical changes in our lives. But we believe that for every year that someone's been homeless and living on the streets, it takes at least 1 month of settlement in order to reacclimate. You know, it's amazing to me because nobody that ever moves into our village will ever sleep on a bed that any other human being has ever slept on, or have a pillow that any other person or bed linens or any of that. And that for weeks and sometimes months, they won't even crawl into that bed. They'll sleep on the floor. They'll come outside on their front porch. And if you've been homeless, and some of our neighbors in the village have been homeless 40 plus years, you multiply 40 times 40 months divided by 12 is a heck of a long time. Within our village, which is an amazing place because everybody wants to live there. We have millionaires that live in our community because they're called to live in the community. But they're called to live in the community because it's a beautiful place to be. I've lived there for 2.5 years. It's the most awesome community I've ever been in. It's the most talked about neighborhood in Austin, Texas. I think it's the most talked about neighborhood in the United States of America. But it takes a lot of things to make that happen. The medical clinic that exists, where there's 10 full-time behavioral health specialists through Integral Care on site. Every member of the Mobile Loaves and Fishes staff has been mental health first aid trained. And so when a crisis begins to manifest, we're there to manage that. Because of that tiny little 2,500 square foot clinic, the partners in the medical, primary, and behavioral health care industry came together and said, Alan, we need to do something bigger. So we have now fully developed a 20,000 square foot facility that will be in the middle of phase 2, which is under construction right now. The clinic is not. We're about to start raising the money on that. That will be run by Integral Care, Community Care, partnership with Central Health. Clearly, Seton's obviously involved in that deal. With a never-before-built in Austin, Texas, 16-bed respite care facility for the chronically homeless, because it's amazing what we do in all of our cities. I'm sure Houston's the same. When we go in for the things that we can get done, whether it's a meniscus repair like I recently had or a gallbladder removed, the hospital needs to get people out of the hospital as fast as they can. But if they're being released to the streets or to the shelter system, it's a disaster. We've really partnered with all of our neighbors to design and create a community that meets all of their specific needs. Right now on phase 2, we have selected 6 neighbors to be seed neighbors that will move from phase 1 into phase 2, have matched them in a Austin-wide, very aggressive competition with an architect and a builder to build a microhome. That's never been done anywhere in the history. We get to do design builds. You and I, we get to go pick out a house or pick out a design, have it built, and pick out its colors and all that kind of stuff. And now we're doing this for our friends. And then the micro enterprise world, where we have distributed over $1.1 million in dignified income through our micro enterprise business that includes the car care, the art house, pottery operation, jewelry making, woodworking, blacksmithing, organic farming, the bed and breakfast, the outdoor Alamo Draft House, movie theater, the culinary operation that we have that makes the best mash hamburger on the planet, and that homemade breakfast biscuits in the morning. It's hard to keep your weight down at Community First Village. And now we're about to open up, I would say, in a soft launch by the end of the year, our Cool Goodness mobile vending operation here in Austin that we think is going to mitigate and help mitigate panhandling by empowering our panhandlers into a lifestyle of working by selling prepackaged food items through mobile vending carts. We had to get some legislation changed at the city level. Second theory of change: housing will never solve homelessness, but community will. People want to live in community. The third theory of change is our vision statement, the purpose statement, the why Mobile Loaves and Fishes exists, and that is that we inspire communities into a lifestyle of service with the homeless. We not only need these great partnerships across all the agencies, but we need every man, woman, and child in the city of Austin coming together and saying, we want to make a difference in our city. We believe that there's about 1,200 chronically homeless men and women, and let me tell you, it's a single point in time count, so the numbers and the data is not that accurate, but it's 1,200, 1,500, and to put that in perspective, there's probably 1,200 to 1,500 Christian churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, Hindu temples, Buddhist temples, Zoroastrian temples in the Austin, Texas area, and if every one of our faith-based communities and civic organizations that might not be faith-based just decided to say, we're going to take one, and we're going to love on that one human being, and we're going to work with people like Mobile Loaves and Fishes or any other providers that are out there to help bring these people back home. It takes a village to build a village. I think we have to stop abdicating this responsibility to City Hall, state government, and Washington, D.C. We need City Hall, we need state government, we need Washington, D.C. This is not an indictment on government. I love government. I love the country that we live in. But when it comes to profound human issues, it requires a human, relational response in partnership with the money response and the policy response that we need to get out of our government. We need to take the initiative in this area. You and I, the citizens of Austin, Texas, need to take the initiative. We need to throw in the resource. We need to throw in the time, the talent, and the treasure. I mean, nobody in Austin, Texas has raised the amount of money privately, and the Mobile Loaves and Fishes Community First Village is 100% privately funded. There's a will. There's a will. There's a will in Austin, Texas. There's a will in Houston, Texas, and there's a will in every city, USA, if we inspire people into that will. I'm a little over. I got it. I want to tell you real quickly that what we're all collectively trying to do is build community, build relationships, bring people home, allow them to heal from the ravages of living on the streets, and hopefully people can rediscover their purpose in life and begin to participate in the economy that everybody wants to participate in. Who are our competitors to doing that? And I'm going to tell you that alcohol, crack cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, synthetic marijuana, mental health issues, greed, selfishness, are the competitors to our ability. That not just applies to our brothers and sisters that are on the street, that applies to all of us out there that want to make that judgment. And when it comes to the drug and alcohol issue, it is perhaps the most complicated issue I have ever encountered in my entire life. And that's an issue where I think we need to bring lots of people together around the table and re-examine the amount of money that we're spending on drug and alcohol rehab. In closing, 4 years that the village has been open, every year a statistically valid study has been done that showed an 80% drop in drug use from the streets to the village and a 60% drop in alcohol use from the streets to the village. And that harm reduction all by itself is pretty powerful. Let me tell you, there's still a lot of problems within that in that drug use area that we continue to battle, but it's a battle worth fighting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for an amazing panel. We have been collecting index cards with your amazing questions, and I'll go with the first one I received this early evening. This gentleman says, I am on a state work group for ending youth homelessness. What can you recommend specifically for their population? This is open to any of our three panelists. This is about youth homelessness.
Sure. So the Austin area is participating in a youth homeless demonstration project through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they're trying some new and innovative things in not only preventing but ending youth homelessness. We know that the interventions are different. There are developmental issues. There are different types of trauma. Particularly when working with youth and young adults, there is such an unbelievable opportunity there to prevent further trauma and to keep people from ever being the folks who we work with after they've been on the streets for 20 plus years. And it takes you, so long to unravel all of it. The resilience in our youth and young adults is there. And, we need to really capitalize on that. And again, Austin is doing some really cool stuff that the nation is looking at, so.
And not being the expert on youth homelessness, I would encourage you to check out LifeWorks and check out some of the programming that you do and see how you can support them in ending youth homelessness.
Is this on? Oh, it's on. Okay, I'm going to combine a few of these questions that are mostly about why is the homeless population increasing in Austin? Why is it larger as a percentage than it is in Houston? And then there's a question about, are we importing homeless because we're offering services to them in cities like Austin and Houston?
Look, I've served pancakes in minus 9-degree weather in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and walked the Mississippi River during the middle of wintertime where there are 500 homeless people that would never move out of Minneapolis ever. When you do studies, the U.S. Conference of Mayors has done studies, everybody's done studies. These are people that are from Austin, they're from Houston, and there's a transitory young population that move from city to city. But I'm going to absolutely promise you nobody's moving out of Minneapolis to come to Austin and get a free PBJ off of Mobile Loaves and Fish's truck. There's no services here. Services are harder than hell to get for people that live here. And look, I'm going to be honest with you, it's an ass whipping to be poor and on the streets of any city, anywhere, to try to go and get medical health care, and nobody's moving down here to do that. And to get into our village, and that's something that people will say, you have to be homeless on the streets of Austin for at least a year. I mean, nobody's going to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say definitely in Houston, we look at the data a lot. We do spot survey and sampling to continue to combat that myth. People are becoming homeless in Houston. It's because of poverty. It's because of community breakdown. They're not coming from other places. The only places where there's been any data to prove that is a little bit on the East and West Coast, particularly the West Coast, where people are going for jobs, and the affordable housing is so horrible that families are finding themselves homeless.
Those, can anyone talk to a recent increase in homelessness in Austin? Is that true? And do we have any data to support it, or why?
I mean, I think that my team now, we were working on homelessness, and now we're working on anti-displacement. And so we're looking at issues of poverty in general. We're looking at issues of institutional racism and systemic inequities. 42% of Austin's homeless population is Black, but only 8% of Austin's population of Black. So that's a very wide disparity. And we do know that some people are just unable to hold on to their homes. They're unable to pay the rent. They were unable to build any kind of wealth over the generations. Why an increase? I mean, we're only looking at the statistics of how hot our market is and how tight our real estate market is and how much our rent and home prices and property taxes are increasing. There's a lot of contributing factors. Austin is growing so fast that we also have to compete to grow our mental health, our physical health, and all of the services to support the people who are here. So there's no magic answer to that question, but we are continuing to look at the trends and seeing how we can get more on the prevention side so that those numbers don't continue to increase.
I think there's a couple of interesting trends. One of them is very local. I-35 from Georgetown to San Marcos is under construction, and virtually every bridge is either having maintenance or being rebuilt. And as a result of that, quite a few people were being displaced, and TxDOT was involved in that. And so there's been a visible increase in homelessness in Austin, Texas as a result of the displacement of people from up under I-35. And if you drive, say, Ben White Boulevard at all, you see that. Second thing is, and this is really very interesting, and I'm interested to see how this is all going to play out. The Ninth Circuit in California ruled that municipal governments and police authorities cannot move people off of public property unless there is a place for that person to go. And I'm going to tell you that in LA and, well, every place, there's an extreme shortage of shelter space. And so if the law says that they can live on public spaces and the courts continue to uphold that, watch what's going to happen here in the next couple of years. It's going to be very, very interesting. The tent city thing will magnify.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're really looking at that also. And just to reiterate, in Houston, everyone thinks that street homelessness is all of a sudden skyrocketed, but they failed to look at the beautification and revitalization and incredible development that has been done in the urban core. I can tell you where I now take my kids biking along the bayous. 15 years ago, I only went there doing street outreach because that's where all the people who were homeless were living. And so what you see in the optics is not always the reality. Dig deeper.
The next question is, how could interested citizens and faith-based organizations help out?
Well, I mean, our model is centered around, we inspire communities into a lifestyle of service with the homeless. We think, that's a big part. We serve 1,200 meals every night off of 12 or 13 trucks, so there's opportunities for people to go out and have that awesome experience. And that experience alone begins to break down the stereotypes of who our friends are out there on the streets. When you get to know them as Ben and Susie and, Tracy and all the people, they cease being the crackhead, lazy, this is their choice. I can tell you that in 21 years of deep dive into this space, I've never met a human that has chosen to be chronically homeless and smoking crack. How about you?
Not once.
Not once.
Mm-mm.
And so that's another myth. And then our village is open. We probably have 250 volunteers every week on that property doing all kinds of goodness. We do big corporate serve days, up to 500 people. So there's a lot of ways.
That you had also told me that how many people volunteer every year at Mobile Loaves and Fishes?
In our system-wide, it's over 20,000 people a year, but 16,000 alone step foot on the campus.
I do want to reiterate that, though. I think some of the best work that you can do if you are moved to do the direct work is to partner with groups that are doing this because they will also be connected to solutions, not just to managing homelessness. But then I'm going to put on my systems and more macro hat, is that every single person here who has a voice, every person who is in a home and part of a community and part of a neighborhood needs to be talking to your neighbors, to your community members, to your elected officials, and demanding that you get your fair share of affordable housing in your community. People want to go out and help at Community First, but they don't always want those people in their neighborhood. And we need everyone who cares about this to take a stand and not to silently sit by while people refuse to allow affordable housing to move forward in high opportunity areas.
I want to just feed off of her comment because I think it's so right on. And, you know, in South Austin, we've had, you know, kind of a growth along the Ben White Boulevard thing. And then there's been a lot of business owners and homeowners coming down to City Hall. And City Hall and the politicians in that district are attempting to solve the homelessness problem, but they're doing it from the perspective of the homeowner and the business owner. Mm-hmm. And so what we have, in essence, a policy, and people are fighting back against that. And I know that Houston, everybody fights it everywhere. The not my backyard mentality, but that's never going to get us anywhere. The only thing that's going to get us in a place is yes in my backyard. That's the key. YIMBY, not NIMBY. I mean, yes in my backyard. And oftentimes that may literally mean welcome into my house. Are you living, 2 people in a 2,500, 3,000 square foot home? Think about it. You know, you have room to make a difference inside of your house. And if you partner with the right agency, you can get matched up with
youth host homes.
There's no, I mean,
and hiring practices, putting people to work, second, third, fifth chance jobs. I mean, these are the things that solve homelessness. And it's something that all of us can do. It's not just for social service workers to do.
Yeah.
And I would say if you're looking for other creative ideas, take mental health first aid training. Everybody should take it. It'll help you understand some of the issues. It'll destigmatize some of the mental health issues. I just took it on Friday. My team had taken it a long time ago, but it's really amazing.
Well, who in this room has a mental health issue in their family? 70, 80% of us?
And the rest of you just don't know it.
You don't know it.
More likely.
And so doing exactly what Carrie is saying is critically important, and going in and really understand. It'll help you understand and manage the frustrations inside your own family.
Yeah. I just took it with the Office of Police Oversight. Yeah, they're taking it. They're taking it. And so the ideas that we're coming up with in the Innovation Office, if we do this digital inclusion training, then you can join the Community Technology Network once we get the curriculum going and help people get connected to Google Voice so they can hold on to their voicemails and their contacts. Where if we are lucky with this MyPass initiative, one of the ways that would work is that you have a digital notary public, so you can help scan people's documents. You can, if you're a runner, go out with Back on My Feet, get to know people, go out with Art from the Streets, see where you can volunteer to be a friend. You know, they don't just need interactions with the formal system. The people who are in the Homelessness Advisory Committee are now some of my friends, and I follow them on Facebook, and we connect every couple of weeks. They're wonderful people, and just get to know them, get to know their name. During South by, there was a guy hanging out, yelling at everybody, stinking to high heaven. I recognized him. I was like, hey, man, how's it going? He's like, oh, my God, it's you. Oh, get away from those guys. Come on over here and let's have a conversation. And he immediately stopped, like, raving like a banshee and just having a conversation like a normal person. So sometimes they're putting on an act because that's what they can do, but then they see you, they know you, you know their name, they have a human interaction. Those are all important. Those are all important.
You know, and they stink to high heaven, as she says, but you know, when you stink to high heaven, it's like putting a cologne on. You put the cologne on, but you really don't smell that cologne anymore because that's what you wear, your deodorant. And so sometimes they just need to be notified that, you know, there's a hygiene issue going on, and they'll go take a shower. We do it in the village all the time. Hey, bud, maybe you need to take a shower. They don't know. And so when you become a friend with somebody, the door's open to let people know that, hey, maybe there's something you ought to think about here.
up to what Carrie was talking about, where do you take the class that was about the mental illness CPR first aid?
Mental health first aid training. Go to Integral Care's website, or you can Google it. You can Google mental health first aid training. Integral Care is offering it. Karen, I see you in the audience. Anybody else? Yeah, in Travis County, it's Integral Care. So you can look that up and look for a class. You can ask a class for your workplace. It's an 8-hour day. It's worth it.
All right, another combo. Maybe I'm reading something into this and you can bust it. But I have two questions. One of them is, why are we talking about systems thinking and design theory and not just building more community first villages? And the other is, how are we looking up the pipeline? What are some ways that y'all are working to stop people from entering homelessness?
There was one day when my teammate and I were trying to create a facilitation session in order to get people to be human-centered, and we tried every framework, every way that we could think about it. We exhausted ourselves. The whiteboard was full, and we sat down and we said, you know what? Alan Graham doesn't need design thinking. But here's what happens in business and in government is we find ways to speak about problems at a distance. We speak at that macro level. We invent words that cover up and mask the real human condition and the real human issue. We forget, we look at big data, and we have a bias. And so design thinking and systems thinking are ways, are business processes, they're business methodologies for us to find our way back to each other again, methodically, take these baby steps, come up with a new way of looking at a situation and figuring out a new way to solve it that honors the human at the center, as well as honoring the fact that there are many, many, many people trying to solve for something.
The other thing, though, is that community first is it's not the answer for everyone. For some people, and we find this is particularly true with our youth and young adults, is that reconnecting to their communities is a really fantastic way to end their homelessness. That may be their family of origin. It may be, the people that they went to school with. For families with minor children, getting into areas where there's economic opportunity for them and where they can afford to live, that's the answer. And so, I want to go live at Community First, okay? And that is a fantastic, fantastic community and model that is working well for a lot of people. And there are people that there need to be other answers for. The other piece is that, and I'm just going to say it's a little brutal, but I'll kind of rip off the Band-Aid here. I've worked with a lot of providers in the greater Houston area who had a ton of passion and could talk really, really well about their programming. But honestly, and again, I'm not saying that this is community first. Let me be very clear about that. But, when you looked at what their outcomes really were and how much money they were spending, we could get a much better outcome for far less and thus serve a lot more people with the money that we had. And so sometimes you need to take that step back and take a look at, what my heart says is great, but it also has to check.
I'd love to share our economics with you. We'll blow you out of the water.
I believe it. I believe it.
But she's completely correct. We don't serve women and children. It's not our deal. We don't serve recently released from people that are incarcerated. Our model is designed for the population that we talked about earlier. It's literally the most difficult population out there, and that's we do think the philosophy of community first applies across the board. I don't care whether you're building a 200-unit apartment complex. People need to live in community and not be isolated in their housing. And frankly, that's systemic in the United States of America. Most of us are living in these hermetically sealed single-family sarcophaguses that we call the American dream, with 8-foot-tall privacy fences in our backyard, and nobody's coming out to hang out. If I was the home czar of Austin, Texas, I would never allow another backyard to be built and a requirement for a front porch on every house in order to bring people out front. to hang out in the
Absolutely.
community and frankly get agitated by, why'd you put a Trump sign in your yard? You got a Hillary sign. That Beto guy's got a DWI, and that we need that. Mm-hmm. That's what draws us closer together, actually. But if we just sit in there and have Fox or MSN or whatever those TV shows are spewing, into our brain cells, we end up hating each other's guts, and then it becomes easy to hate the people that are standing on the street corner.
That's human-centered design right there.
Huh?
Yeah. That's human-centered design right there.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank our three panelists, Ava, Ellen, and Carrie, for doing an excellent panel. I think they really presented some solutions that are ending homelessness. And let's all give a great deal of applause to our excellent panelists. And this has actually been one of my favorite speaker series. I've been doing this for 5 years. Secondly, please fill out your survey. It takes about a minute, and that there's a box outside. You could put it in your pens if you took a pen. And thank you all for coming to the Imagine Austin Speaker Series. Yes, sir. Sure.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, we agree.
We're short
Yeah.
800 shelter beds minimum. We don't have them. But
agree.
that's what we're working on right now, is getting more of those.
I promise you, this is the one person within the city of Austin that, really criticizes the city tremendously, and it's that pushing that rope up the mountaintop. It's a bitch, man.
Well, and
and we're able to onboard 3 people a week.
Yeah.
That's our
So,
our deal. Three people.
When you get to underbridge space too, though, you're looking at who has jurisdiction over it, who can move, people who can't, and then when you force people to move, then you get a lawsuit thrown on you. And so Houston right now has been in a 3-year lawsuit because they were pushing people to move and go elsewhere. To a sanctioned space where there were other resources, and we got a cease and desist, and we can't do anything.
I understand that, ma'am. We're not represented by our city council here tonight. I don't think there's any city council else paying attention in this group tonight. And if I was to go and build a shanty town on her road, I'll guarantee you the police would be there to pick me up and take me somewhere to get some type of service.
Yeah. Well, you need to be showing up at city council, and you need to be signing up for public comment, and you need to be demanding that there be affordable housing everywhere, because being under a bridge in unhealthy, unsanitary conditions is not good for people who are living unsheltered, and it's not good for the housed people around them. We're one community.
And I also recommend you call 311. And again, call your council person. Well, thank you again all for coming, and drive safely. And again, please submit your surveys. Thank you very much.